the Islam conflict is not the worst of what we face, in my view. You may disagree. I think this is going to be a tough one to solve and a tough one to walk through and a tough one to reconcile. But it's not ultimately going to threaten the coexistence of the United States. What is? Maybe some of our wandering lack of values, maybe something of our economic dependence upon China that may ultimately weaken our currency. I had someone who sent me, this. Okay. Yeah, someone sent me this. Do you know what the red is? This represents the national budget. And what is the red? Our military expenditures. Yeah, now maybe we got to do it 60%. But no party is attacking any part of this. But Social Security and health and human welfare is this 6%. Now, I'm not trying to preach or be an economist here, but I'm saying there are many people that think the bigger threat to our future welfare is will there be a healthy and sustaining and vigorous economy and moral and ethical context? I was with someone else, well, Laurie knows, with my cousin over for lunch the other day. And her husband has a grandson, isn't it, Tony? Yeah. Who we can all sympathize with because we've had Tonys in our own family. It's a boy that's 21 now. He's never held a job. He's dropped out of every school he's been. He lives, from hand to mouth to get drug money. And her mom doesn't know what to, or her mom doesn't know what to do. And grandma doesn't know what to do. And my other cousin and I were talking with Kay, and we said, Tony isn't just by himself. He's surrounded by a whole milieu. Who are his friends? The same people that give no thought to give. And if we've got a culture that thinks only, well, that's where we've got this. Now, we ought to try to understand why Muslims distrust us. It's partly because of the conflict, warring conflict that we're now in. It's partly because of our support to Israel. It's partly because of other cultural reasons that I lived there. Now, I'm just going to try to say, let's get a broader perspective now on Muslim Western or Muslim Christian conflict. And I give a typology. I give a list of differing situations. I didn't get it out of a book. It's out of my head, and it may not be anything you trust. But let's get to see what, at least, where we're at with understanding what we face in our present-day conflict with. I list 8 differing situations, and I lump different countries into each. I think I'm more or less right on this. But the first, a Muslim minority lives within a pluralistic society somewhat peacefully. That happens in India, where the 15 to 18% of the Muslim population fully support a democratic, secular government that gives toleration to all religions. Most Hindus in India, most Muslims as most Hindus, and all Christians there. In Europe, despite fears, and the United States, Muslims, a small minority, not as large as in India, but generally support and live within a democratic, pluralistic framework. That's, by the way, India would be the largest Muslim country in the world if the Muslims in India had their own country. There are more Muslims. India has over 1 billion population, so take 20% of that, or a little bit less. The Muslims in India outnumber all of those in Indonesia, all of those in Malaysia, all of those in Pakistan. So there are two huge examples where Muslims live within a pluralist situation. The second example I give, there are Muslim countries that are democratic, and they've inherited a democratic framework from colonial rule, although they have become Muslim countries in some restrictive ways. And I'm talking mainly about Indonesia, which is 80 to 90% Muslim. It has a strong Christian majority. You know that there's a church right here, a set of churches among Batak peoples in Indonesia that are Lutheran, although they by background and by confession today, that is almost as large as the ELCA. Did you know that? It has grown. That's one of the seminaries of which I God willing, and Creeks don't rise. I hope to go to next year. All right, so it's mainly, Indonesia is mainly Muslim, as is Malaysia. Indonesia is the most open. It, in its constitutions, recognizes 5 religions. Hinduism, because Hindus moved from India into Indonesia. The island of Bali is almost entirely a Hindu region. So Indonesia recognizes Hinduism, Buddhism, there's some Chinese minority there, Confucianism, and Buddhism together, and then Islam, that's 3. And you know what the other 2 are? Catholics and Protestants. I don't know why they distinguish between the 2, but that's what their constitution does, and it offers full freedom of religion. Malaysia does the same, but it will not allow any Christians will not allow any Malay background Malaysian citizens to become Christian. That simply is against the law. And a new Bible translation, I told some of this, you the first class, there's a new Bible translation into the Malaysian language, which is the same as the Indonesian language, Bahasa Malay and Bahasa Indonesia. The new Bible translation, as before, uses the word for God, Allah. There is no God but God. Muhammad is his prophet. There is no God but Allah, and Allah is, and Muhammad is his prophet. That's an old Semitic word for God, used in the Old Testament. And the Malaysians said, they banned this Bible. They said, you can't use a word that the Malays use for God. Been used for centuries there. But the Christians are mainly Chinese and Indians who are minority peoples within Malaysia. They finally relented, but they will not allow any Malay to read that Bible. So there are some minor restrictions. But here are totally Muslim countries that have a jihadist minority party. You know what I mean by jihadist? We usually don't say radical Muslim anymore. Jihadist is the global term that is used for that segment of Islam that interprets jihad as an armed struggle against the Western and Christian oppressors. That's jihadist. So there's a jihadist party, but that's the second example. Democracy inherited either from the Dutch or the British in these two cases, and a very thriving democracy, and mostly openness toward plurality of religions.